Fred, obviously there's a long way to go on this yet. We're at the early stages, it seems, but just potentially how much trouble could Donald Trump be in here?
Well, the challenge here in Georgia and Fulton County really is probably, along with Jack Smith, one of the two most critical ones for him. And he is facing the potential of real indictment and real criminal charges and real time to serve if found guilty. And right now, it's looking pretty dire for him here in Georgia.
Trump supporters will say that this case is politically motivated, and there's a lot of evidence to back that argument up. When you look at all the legal cases that have been brought against the former president, they will say this is just an attempt to stop him becoming the president once again. Could it stop him?
Well, I think it's certainly possible. And as Republicans are starting to say, or at least one, Will Hurd, that the whole reason Donald Trump is running for president is to try to stop the prosecutions. So there's politics being played on both sides, one could say. But I think that many folks in the legal community feel that these are very legit and egregious charges that are being brought against Donald Trump, and they need to be pursued. But that being said, as you mentioned, for his followers, every indictment just solidifies his support within the Republican primary. And so, it helps him increase his lead over other opponents. So on the one hand, it's good for him politically within the Republican world, but it's certainly not good for him legally. And I think in the larger context of the general election, this could really spell trouble for him, even if he is not found criminally liable by the time the election takes place next November.
I've heard the argument made that all of these attacks on Donald Trump and the legal cases brought against him are actually just playing into his hands. If nothing else, it gives him an awful lot of attention and airtime. How well positioned would you say Donald Trump is for another run at the White House?
Well, within the Republican primary, I think he's very well positioned. Remember, you have to win your party primary to then advance to the November election, and then there the Democrat takes on the Republican. And so within the Republican primary, I think all the polling even supports this. Donald Trump is doing really well. I saw a poll last week that had him 40 points over his nearest competitor, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. So for him, he's very well positioned to win the Republican primary and be the Republican nominee in November of next year.
And off the back of that, what's Donald Trump's biggest challenge? Will it be getting the Republican nomination, or will it be harder to actually defeat the Democrat nomination?
Well, right now, it looks like winning in November, defeating the Democrats is his larger challenge. Again, his base is large within the Republican primary, and you have so many people, more than a dozen candidates for president running right now on the Republican side. They're splitting the anti-Trump vote. And again, in the primary, it's a simple plurality, who receives the most out of the field. And so a large field plays to his advantage, and having a solid base also plays to his advantage. And so within that angle or that question, Donald Trump is benefiting tremendously within the Republican world from what's happening right now.
Obviously, in America, it's pretty clear that politics is divided straight down the middle. It's a fairly even split between the two parties. You've got that crucial sort of small number of people who remain undecided every time the election comes around. They've seen what President Trump looks like. How do you feel they're likely to sway going forward now that they've seen what the alternative was, President Biden?
So the reason that President Biden won here in Georgia in 2020 was that there were a number of Republicans who stayed home. And then we saw in 2022, just last year, that Senator Raphael Warnock won Georgia because Republicans stayed home, and he actually picked up some Republican voters. And so you're talking about a very small share. So as you mentioned, America's almost split 50-50, say call it 48-48. And so you're really just talking about 4% here or there who will decide the election. And so for Donald Trump, the problem here is that traditional Republicans, people who are outside of his base, don't really like him. And that while they might not vote Democrat, they aren't going to vote for him. And so that creates a real big problem for him and creates a real opportunity for Democrats. But let's be clear, Democrats have their own challenges ahead with their own base and getting Democratic voters excited enough to come back out and vote for a Biden-Harris ticket.
Good to speak to you. Appreciate your time. Fred Hicks, political strategist, is my guest.